time, we cut out the cancer.
It's not a tumor.
Malignant. Malignant is a 2021 horror movie directed by James Wan, written by James Wan, Akela Cooper, and Ingrid Biso. So the basics of the plot are this. The main character, Madison, starts having these visions of grisly murders, and it turns out they're not hallucinations or daydreams or anything. She's actually seeing these murders that are happening as they happen. I'm gonna leave it at that, because I don't like spoilers.
No spoilies!
Now let me just say before I actually start reviewing this movie that I was very excited for it when I heard about it, because James Wan is a tried and true horror director. He did Saw, Conjuring 1 and 2, Insidious 1 and 2. When he does horror movies, he kind of reinvents the genre. When Saw came out, it changed the whole landscape of horror. When The Conjuring came out, it kind of revitalized the haunted house movie. So, with this movie, I was very excited.
I'm so excited!
And if you've been following the discourse on the internet, you've probably seen that this is a very polarizing movie. You're in one of two camps. You either love it or you hate it, and there's not much in between. And I'll just let you know, and you've probably guessed by my thumbnail, but I'm in the camp that hated this movie.
Hate us because they ain't us.
And I will say, between me and my three siblings, I'm the only one who hated it. The other three loved it, which seems about right because Rotten Tomatoes has about a 75% for this movie. So 3 loving it and 1 hating it seems about right. But since I know that they love it, I will try to include things that I think people might like, but I just didn't. So let me just dive right in on the things that didn't work for me in this movie. I know James Wan is a good director. I've seen quite a few of his movies, and he's always a good director, sets up some pretty great shots. However, in this movie, I felt that all the shots felt pretty disjointed. You'd have times where I'd see a shot in the movie and I'd go, you know, if this was in a different movie or in a different context, I'd probably really like that shot. But then it would jump to a different shot that doesn't work well with that first shot, so it seems disjointed, like it doesn't fit together. And a lot of this movie is like that. I would go, wow, that was jarring, or why did he set the camera up like that? This is weird. The individual shots were still good. I'd go, wow, yeah, if you just taught that one little section, that one little scene, go, wow, that was pretty good filmmaking. That was good camera work. But as a whole, it doesn't mesh. And the writing is definitely the weakest part of this movie. The actual dialogue can feel a little stilted and downright goofy sometimes, not in a good way. I feel like I'm gonna say not in a good way a lot in this review because sometimes these things can be done in a good way where it's fun, but I didn't feel that in this movie. The first 2/3 to 3/4 of this movie is pretty boring, pretty cliche, uses a lot of horror tropes that have been pretty played out, and the writing is just uninspired. Now, the last quarter of this movie is a different story, but I'll get to that in a second. There are certain characters that don't feel like they belong in this movie. The law enforcement characters seem like they were taken out of some crappy police procedural drama on TV and thrown into this, and they were just like, just do the same thing you were doing before. And if you've seen any police procedural TV show, you'll know what I mean. The acting and the writing aren't really up to par with what would belong in a movie.
It's like somebody who drinks too much, snorts cocaine, bets the house on the ponies.
It's TV. There's a million of these shows out there, and it's like, well, if you like that, you're gonna like this. But for this movie, it doesn't feel like it works. And speaking of not working, there's a lot of choices made that seem out of place and incongruous to the rest of the movie. For example, the music. I did not like the way the music was done at all. The music cues chosen and the themes used don't feel like they belong in a horror movie, and every time they came on, I was like, is this what they meant to do? One of the musical themes they keep going back to in this movie sounds to me a little bit like the Pixies' Where Is My Mind, which was used in Fight Club, so every time it came on, I was like, are we watching Fight Club? What's happening? Like, it just didn't work for this movie for me. It felt totally out of place. And now let me discuss how the movie changes between the first 3/4 and the last quarter. This movie has a twist, and I'm not going to reveal what that is because I'm not a terrible person who likes to spoil things.
I'm a good noodle.
But I will say that this twist is bonkers, but not in a good way. I told you I'd say that a lot. And hey, I love a good bonkers twist, but it has to work in the context of the movie, and it needs to feel in harmony with the rest of it, and I didn't feel like it did, and I didn't like it, and I laughed my way through the last quarter of it, but I was laughing at it, not with it. The choices made in the last quarter of this movie are so ridiculous and different than the first 3 quarters that I was honestly shocked. It's one of those twists where in a different movie with a different tone, and if I had liked the stuff leading up to it more, I might think it was awesome and just laugh in a good way, but I didn't like the rest of the movie, so it doesn't work for me. Truthfully, there's very few things about this movie that do work for me besides some individual shots, because I know James Wan has a good eye and the actual camera work is good, even though they don't work well together. But I'll bring up some things that you may like even if I didn't. For example, my brother Mark said that it seems as if James Wan made exactly the movie he wanted to make. As bananas as it is, this is exactly what he wanted, and I can't argue with that. This was his vision, this is what he wanted. I just didn't like that vision. But if you do like that vision, you might love this movie. It's also said that this movie can sometimes feel like a campy 80s slasher B movie. And sure, it doesn't really feel like that to me. The last quarter, maybe. But the stuff leading up to that, it doesn't feel like that, which is maybe why I feel like it doesn't mesh or flow. Because if the whole movie had that vibe, I might have enjoyed it more. Hell, I love Evil Dead 2, which is probably the campiest horror slasher B movie, comedy, whatever you want to call it, out there. Groovy. And I love that. But this didn't give me those vibes.
The vibe's off, man.
It's interesting, the more I think about the twist, it's so bananas that I really do think that in a different context, or if I liked the stuff leading up to it, just in a different movie, I might think it was great, but I just don't. I can't get myself to do it. Like, I wouldn't watch this movie again. I wouldn't recommend it to people, which is sad, but it is what it is. When all said and done, the least you can say is that James Wan took some chances and did what he wanted, just none of it worked for me. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give it a 4.2 out of 10. Malignant is not for me. If you like this movie, more power to you. This is not one of those movies where I think it should be universally hated. I understand if you like this. It's more of a personal taste and preference thing, so good for you. And I will say at least James Wan is doing something different. All of his horror movies are very different from one another, so he's not like some filmmakers who always make the same movie over and over again. Alright guys, well if you like this review, please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. It helps the channel out, and check back for more reviews soon.
Who are you, Gabriel?
Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.